Hey guys, it's Sarah with ExtremeTerrain.com, and today we have a review and install of the Old Man Emu 2-inch heavy load suspension lift kit fitting your 16 and newer Toyota Tacoma models. This is perfect for the Tacoma owner who wants a complete lift kit for the front and rear of their Tacoma and wants one that features all upgraded components as well. This kit provides 2 inches of lift in the front and the rear, as well as all upgraded suspension components all around. So depending on your truck's model, stock tire sizes may vary. With our truck, we have a 31-inch tire stock, which is what you will see in this video. And with this kit installed, you will fit a 31-inch tire. You can choose one with a bit more aggressive tread, however, it does contact this plastic piece just slightly, so you may have to do some trimming. This kit includes new coil springs for the front, as well as Nitrocharger Sport twin tube shocks that feature vehicle-specific valving for improved ride quality over all terrains. Now we're at the back to show you some of the rear components. Now the rear features the same Nitrocharger shock as the front that are matched to each specific spring. They also include a full leaf replacement with this rear kit as well. And those leaf springs provide draw tapered and diamond cut leaves to increase ride quality and provide protection against breakage, significantly increasing the leaf spring life. So as far as price goes, this kit comes in at around $1,700, which is a little bit on the higher end price-wise when compared to other options. And for your money, you are getting a full suspension kit that replaces your springs and shocks in the front and the rear, which a lot of other options do not offer from a company known for performance and quality. And as far as the install goes, I'm giving this one a 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. Some mechanical expertise is required for this install, but it does feature a direct bolt-up install that can be done within 1 day. So with that said, let's check out that install. For this install, you will need an impact gun or a regular hand ratchet will work just fine. You'll also need 22, 19, 17, 14, 12, and 10 millimeter sockets. You may also want a swivel extension and a regular extension. You'll need a pair of needle nose pliers and you may want a pair of vice grips. You'll also need 19, 17, 14, 12, and 8 millimeter wrenches. You'll need a pry bar, regular hammer, as well as a rubber mallet. You'll also need the tool to drop your spare tire, and you may want a caliper hanger or bungee cord to support the knuckle. All right, so the first step in our uninstall, with your truck in the air supported, you're gonna remove that front wheel. Now, if you don't have a lift, a jack and jack stands will work fine as long as it's supported safely. Once you've done that, grab a set of needle nose pliers. We're gonna remove the cotter pin holding on that nut for our outer tie rod. So to get this cotter pin out, it helps to straighten the other side. Just go ahead and pinch those 2 pins straight. And once you've done that, grab the opening, use some leverage, and just pull it straight out. And now that your cotter pin is removed, you can get a socket on top of here. We're gonna use a 19 millimeter. Go ahead and remove this nut. Now, if the ball joint is fully seated in this part of the knuckle, it's probably not gonna come out from just force down. What you may need to do here, suggest turning that a little bit to give yourself some more room. Rethread on this nut to protect your threads. And then we're just gonna strike this side right here with a hammer to release this ball joint. Once that is released, go ahead and remove that nut again and pull it out of the knuckle. Next up, we're gonna remove the sway bar end link from the knuckle. Now you need to remove this 17 millimeter nut. You can do it with an impact, but if the end link starts to spin, you'll need a 17 millimeter wrench and a 6 millimeter Allen key to hold that end link steady so you can break it loose. Then once your nut is removed, go ahead and remove the end link from the knuckle. Next up, we're gonna be removing this bolt that holds on your brake line bracket, just to give us a little extra slack when we drop our knuckle down. Grab a 12 millimeter socket and get this bolt removed. Remove the bracket out of the knuckle. Next up, we can also remove this second bracket that holds the brake line to the frame, just to give us a little bit more room here. We're using a 12mm wrench, just because this line's a little bit in the way. You can use a socket with a swivel as well. And make sure you remove the brake line out of this hole as well. There is a second ABS line that is attached to your upper control arm. What you want to do here is grab a 10mm socket and remove this bolt so that you can remove this bracket as well. Next up, we'll be removing this pin holding on the nut for your upper ball joint. And on the far side, this might be a little bit hard to see, but there is a tab that you need to release. And once you've released the back part of this clip, grab a needle nose pliers and just pull it straight out. Now you can see the hook part that we had to release right here. It goes around the edge of the nut. Once you remove that, we can remove the nut. Now that we have that pin removed, we can grab a 19mm socket with a swivel extension and remove this nut. We're actually gonna leave it on just slightly because we will need to hit this part of the knuckle to release it. Now with a pry bar, we can pry down on that upper control arm, give ourselves a little bit of slack, remove the nut, and then release the upper control arm out of the knuckle. Now we can fully release the knuckle from the upper control arm, but since we have it hanging off to the side here, what we're gonna do is just have a bungee cord support this for now so that we don't damage the axle, which is still attached. We don't need it to fully support, but as long as we're just taking a little bit of the weight off of it, that will be better. Next up, we're gonna be removing the 3 nuts that hold on the top of the strut. Grab a 14mm socket, or we're using a ratcheting wrench here, and get these removed. You can leave one threaded on slightly just to hold that in place. Continue on to remove the rest of them. This one in the back is probably going to be hard to see, but the same process, using your socket or wrench, go ahead and remove it. Now for the bottom of the strut, you'll need a 19mm wrench and a 19mm socket, and get this nut removed. Now to remove this bolt, right now there's a bit of tension on it from the lower control arm and the strut. Now if you lift up on the lower control arm, you should be able to wiggle it free, and if you don't have a second set of hands, you can grab a rubber mallet and tap it out. In order to make it easier to drop our strut, we are going to lower the sway bar. This step is optional. If you can wiggle that strut out with the sway bar in place, feel free, but this does make it a lot easier. There's 4 12mm bolts holding on this cover. Once that's removed, we can drop the sway bar down and out of the way. Grab a 12mm socket, go ahead and remove all 4 of these bolts. Next up, remove the other 12mm bolts. This one is at the back. Now we're moving on to the front 2 bolts on your skid plate. These are a little bit harder to get to. You can remove this plastic trim piece, or you can just grab an extension and pull it back slightly. Once you're on it, go ahead and remove that with a 12mm socket. Repeat that with your other bolt at the front of the skid plate. Make sure you're supporting this, as this is the last bolt holding it in. Now with all the bolts removed, you can remove this skid plate by pushing it slightly forward. That will unhook the front. Once it's unhooked on both sides, you can bring it down. Now that we have our skid plate removed, we can remove these two 14mm bolts on each side that hold on the sway bar bracket. Grab a 14mm bolt and get these removed. Now make sure you have something supporting this so you don't let it fall straight down. And now that we have the sway bar mount disconnected on this side, make sure you repeat those steps to disconnect the end link as well as the mount on the opposite side. And once the sway bar is completely disconnected, you can go ahead and slide it out of the way. Now there are two brackets there, so it won't come off the truck unless you remove those. But as long as you push this out of the way, we can now remove the strut assembly. We're removing that nut that we had placed on top just to hold it in place. Then we can bring it out and down and remove it off the truck. All right, so now that we have our strut assembly removed from our truck, we can slide it in the spring compressor here. Now, if you don't have access to a spring compressor or you don't feel comfortable using one, you can take this entire strut assembly to a shop, have them press this top hat off, and install it on your new strut assembly. With that said, we're gonna go ahead and line it up in the spring compressor. And compress until the tension is off the spring. Now that we have the spring compressed enough that we can wiggle the bottom of the strut, what we're gonna do is grab a 17mm wrench, and you'll also need a 7mm wrench to hold this top part from spinning. Go ahead and break it loose. You may need some heat here if it's really seized on there. You can remove the factory nut, washer, and rubber bushing, and slide the strut out. Now we can release the tension on the spring so we can remove that top hat. Now we can remove the top hat off of the spring. And remove the spring itself. Set it aside, we won't be reusing this either. Now we have our new spring here. We're gonna set it into the spring compressor and start to get it lined up. Now this kit does require us reusing this top hat and rubber bushing. If you'd like to use a new one, just have all new components, you can, but for now we're gonna show you how to install this factory one. And now that you have the top hat in place, we can set up our spring compressor and compress this spring. Now that we have our spring compressed, we can assemble the strut. Slide the brackets onto the bottom, make sure they're sitting on that shelf of your strut. Next up, install the dust shield over top. Now this comes pre-installed, so you will have to slide the dust shield off in order to get this ring on. Once you have that dust shield in place, reinstall this factory washer. Now if you choose to buy a kit for the top hat, that will come with. We're reusing the factory one here. Once you've done that, what we're gonna do is go into the bottom. Once it's lined up, ensure that this ring at the bottom is also lined up. From there, what we're gonna do is install that factory rubber bushing back on the top. Install the metal ring, as well as the washer and the nut that was included. Now, if no threads are sticking up, you may need to compress the spring a little bit more. Go ahead and get that threaded on. Once you have it on and the bottom is lined up, grab a 19mm wrench and tighten it down. You may also need an 8mm wrench to hold that top as we get it tightened. Now that we have that top nut tight, you can release that spring. Again, just make sure everything is lined up properly. Once the tension is completely off, you can remove it from the spring compressor. All right, now that we have our factory strut and spring uninstalled from our Tacoma, we can check them out side by side with our new strut and spring over here. Now, as you guys can see, the height difference between the factory spring and our new spring here, the combination of the strut and spring will get you that added 2 inches in the front. And because this strut was designed with vehicle-specific valving and to work with this specific spring, you're gonna get that height difference without losing your factory ride quality. And with that said, let's go ahead and finish up our install. Now that we have our strut assembly complete, we can get it installed on our truck. Go ahead and set it in place. Line up the studs up through the top of your strut tower and reinstall your factory nuts. Then the one in the back might be a little bit hard to see, but same process, go ahead and thread on that factory nut. And we'll get the bottom bolt lined up. All right, now we're gonna line up the bottom of the strut, and you may need a pry bar to get it in place. And I'm just putting on a rag on that pry bar just to make sure we don't damage the powder coat more than we have to. That'll help prevent rust in the future. So what we're gonna do is lift up, line up that bolt, and get it started. Then once you have the bolt started, go ahead and wiggle that lower control arm to line it the rest of the way up. You'll see it come out the other side. And if you need to, you can use a rubber mallet and tap it the rest of the way through. Once you have it fully seated, go ahead and reinstall the factory washer as well as the nut. Then grab your 19mm wrench and your 19mm socket and tighten it down. Then with your bottom bolt tightened down, grab a 14mm socket or a wrench and tighten down these nuts up top. Repeat that for the back one as well. Again, this might be a little bit hard to see. Now we can get the upper control arm and ball joint reseated into the top of the knuckle. Now we're going to use a pry bar to pry down on the upper control arm. You can also put a jack underneath the lower control arm and jack up a little bit to remove some of the distance between that. Go ahead and thread that nut on, and we can tighten it down. Now with a 19mm socket, and you may want a swivel extension, go ahead and tighten this down. Now we want to reinstall this factory pin. Go ahead and line it up through the tops of the castle nut through this hole in the center of your ball joint. Now if the hole is not open, all you need to do is tighten it down slightly just so that hole is exposed and you can slide the pin in. Once you line it up, go ahead and press it in place. Make sure that you hear it click and that's locked in. All right, so now that we have our strut assembly reinstalled and it's time to get the sway bar bolted back up, make sure you repeat all of those steps to install your strut assembly on the other side. Then once you're caught up to this point, you can get the sway bar bolted back up simultaneously. Now what you're gonna do is slide the factory bracket over top of that bushing. Start to line it up with the threads in the bottom of your frame. Grab those factory bolts, get them threaded back in. Then with your 14mm socket, go ahead and tighten these down. Then once you've installed these sway bar mounts on both sides, you can reinstall the end link. Just through the knuckle, go ahead and thread the nut on the other side. Then we can get it tightened down. Now that we have the end link reinstalled, we can tighten it down. Grab a 17mm wrench and a 6mm Allen key to hold it still. Go ahead and tighten it down. Next up, you can reinstall the outer tie rod through the knuckle. Go ahead and grab that factory castle nut and thread it over top. Then we will get it tightened down. Now with your 19mm socket, you can tighten it down. Now the nut is tightened down, we can reinstall the cotter pin. Now you can reuse your factory one, but I recommend just getting a new one if you can. That way it is a lot easier to lock in place. Just go ahead and install it through the top of the ball joint. If it's not lined up, you can tighten it down a little bit more just to get that hole lined up. And then once it's all the way through, you can grab it on the other side and with your needle nose pliers, bend each side into place. Now we can reattach the brake line bracket to your knuckle, reinstall the factory hardware, and with a 12mm socket, tighten it down. Now we can install the ABS line bracket into the top of the control arm. Go ahead and thread your factory bolt up there. And with your 10mm socket, tighten it down. And finally, reinstall the brake line bracket that goes onto your frame. Grab that factory bolt, get it threaded in. And because the brake line is in the way here, we're gonna use a ratcheting wrench, a 12mm, to tighten it down. All right, and now that our passenger side install is complete, make sure you repeat all of those steps to finish up your driver's side install. Then once you've done that, we can head on to our rear install. Now before we can begin the disassembly of the rear, we do need to drop the spare tire just to give yourself some more room to remove those leaf springs. This is optional, but it does make it a ton easier to get them out, so I recommend just taking the second to drop it. Now all you need for this part is the spare tire tool that is under your rear seat. Assemble it, they all just click together, and then you're gonna slide it in this gap between the bumper and the tailgate. You'll see a small square opening. Go ahead and spin it until you feel it click in place. And then you can go ahead and twist it to lower your spare tire. Now that your tire is on the ground, you have a little bit of slack in your chain. All you need to do is push down on this bracket. If you need to, you can tap it with a rubber mallet. Twist the bracket and remove it. All right, and now that we have the spare tire on the ground, we can slide it out of the way. Now we're underneath our truck. We have our axle supported by several pole jacks. And once we have it in the air and supported, grab a 17mm wrench and a 17mm socket and remove the bolt at the bottom of your shock. Now, if you don't have pole jacks to support it, a regular jack and jack stands will work just fine. Now you can slide your bolt out, and then we'll unbolt it at the top. All right, so now we're gonna get the top part of the shock unbolted. There's a nut up top here that attaches it to the threaded body. Now there is a slotted spot you can hold with a small wrench up top here, and then with a 14mm wrench remove this nut. However, I believe this gets in the way and we can't seem to get this nut off with a wrench up top here. So an alternative, not the best way to do it, but it'll definitely get the job done, is to hold this bottom part with a pair of vice grips. And with your 14mm wrench, go ahead and remove that. There's also a metal ring and a rubber bushing up top. Gonna remove those as well. And now that you have that nut removed up top, you can wiggle the shock out of its mount at the bottom and pull it down. Now that we have our shock removed, we're gonna start with the nuts that hold on our U-bolts. Again, make sure that the axle is supported in several spots with pole jacks or regular jack stands. And with your 19mm socket, remove these nuts. Remove the stock bracket and set it aside. Then go ahead and slide off the factory U-bolts. Now remove the bump stop cap on top of the leaf spring. And now that you have that disconnected, we can go ahead and lower down the axle to take all of the tension off of our spring. Now, because this is a straight axle truck, it may be easier to do both sides simultaneously. So if you'd like, get your other side caught up to this point, you can lower the axle down at the same time on either side. Now that we have our axle dropped, we can go ahead and loosen and remove this leaf spring. We're gonna start with this top bolt on your shackle here, and what we're gonna do is loosen this but not remove it right now. Grab your 19mm socket and a 19mm open-ended wrench for the other side. Go ahead and loosen this up. Now if the nut does come off all the way, all you need to do is just spin it back on a little bit. We can move on down to this bolt underneath. With your 19mm wrench and 19mm socket, go ahead and get this removed. Now if the bolt is hung up in there, just lift up a little bit on the leaf spring and slide it out. Now go ahead and remove the bolt at the front of your leaf spring with a 19mm wrench and a 19mm socket. Now, if this bolt does not want to come out nicely, what you can do is grab an open-ended wrench and stick it on the other side of the bolt. Then with your socket, you can walk this out. Don't forget to remove the bracket here that holds on your brake line. It's attached to the leaf spring bracket here. So with a 12mm socket, get this removed. And now that you have your factory leaf spring unbolted from your truck, you may want to grab a friend to help you out to guide it over top of the axle and remove it. All right, so before we can get this new leaf installed, what we need to do is prep it by installing the bushings at each end. Now these bushings are included in the kit, so go ahead and grab a set and we'll show you how to press them in. Now before we can get these bushings installed, I do recommend putting a little bit of grease on here just to cut down on noise and wear. Then what you're gonna do is press these into the leaf. Repeat that with the second piece, which just goes on the back side. Same thing, a little bit of grease on there. Press that in. Next up, the metal sleeve that goes right in the center. Toss a little bit of grease on here as well. Doesn't have to be a lot, just a little coating. Go ahead and press this into the center. Now you should be able to press this in by hand, but if it gets a little bit difficult towards the end, you can either put it on a flat surface or you can use the other bushing. Just go ahead and line that up and tap it in. Now you can repeat that on the other side. Now before we can get our new leaf spring installed, we just need to transfer over the shackle. Now we loosened this bolt earlier, but now we're actually going to remove it. Transfer it over to our new leaf spring and just double check that you have the leaf in the proper positioning before you get this installed. Meaning there is a front and a back. You want to make sure we are installing this on the back of the leaf spring, just like factory. Once you have that lined up, go ahead and slide the factory bolt through and loosely reinstall your washer and your nut. Now to install the new leaf spring, you're just gonna do the uninstall in reverse. You might want a friend to help you guide it over top of the axle. And and start to get it lined up in the axle and in both brackets. Start to line up your leaf spring. Make sure it seats in the axle, and then we can line up each mounting point. Now we can line up our factory hardware through each side of the leaf spring, through each bushing. Go ahead and get it lined up. And if you need to, you can tap it in with a rubber mallet. Then once you have the bolt through, go ahead and install the nut on the other side. We are going to keep this loose for now until we get all of the bolts installed. Now you can repeat that on the other side, lining up your bolt through the shackle and installing the factory hardware. So we are going to wait to tighten down those bolts until the truck is on the ground. So we're going to leave them hand tight for now. Make sure you install that bump stop back on top of your spring, and then we can install the U-bolts. Slide the U-bolts over top of your new leaf and right in that opening on the bump stop. Repeat that for the other side. Install the other U-bolt over top of the leaf and make sure it grabs that opening on that bump stop up top. Then you can grab your factory bracket and get it lined up with all of these new U-bolts. And they did come with new hardware. So grab the new hardware, a washer as well as a nut, and thread it on the bottom of your U-bolts. All right, so now that we have our factory components uninstalled from our truck, we can take a look at them side by side with our new components here. Now, as you can see, as far as these springs go, they do feature a similar construction from factory. However, this new spring set features 2 additional leaf springs when compared to the 4 of your factory. This one has 6. That's where you're gonna get the height difference from, get those extra 2 inches out of the rear. In addition, the shock has been matched to the factory for specific valving that goes along with that lifted height so that your ride does not change from factory. So with that said, let's go ahead and finish up our install. All right, now we're to the point of tightening these down. Now, if you are doing both sides simultaneously, I recommend getting the other side caught up to this point so you can tighten these down and bring the axle up together. Grab your 22mm socket, go ahead and tighten these down. And you want to tighten them down as evenly as possible. Now we're gonna get our new shock installed, and before we can do that, we do need to remove this bushing and washers off of your factory. Now these might be a little bit on the old side, so it might be a good idea to consider getting a new one, but for now we're gonna take this stack and transfer it over to our new shock. Now we have our bushing stack, and we're gonna get it installed in the exact same way it was on the factory, just right over top of your new shock, and then we can get it installed. Now you can get the new shock installed. Go ahead and get it over top of that brake line, and then get it lined up with the stud in the top of the frame as you start to line up the bottom as well. Now don't forget to reinstall the bushing as well as the washer on the top, and then thread that factory nut on there. We're gonna leave it loose for now while we get the bottom lined up. Line up the bottom of your shock as well. It's a little bit of a tight fit, so it may take some wiggling here. And if you need to, you can tap it in with a rubber mallet. Now you can install the factory hardware, and you may need to wiggle this around a little bit to get this bolt fully installed. Then if you're having a little bit of trouble lining it up the rest of the way, you can grab a rubber mallet and tap that bolt all the way through. Now you can install the washer and the nut over top of that factory bolt. And with a 17mm wrench and 17mm socket, go ahead and tighten it down. Now we have our factory nut up top. Go ahead and get that threaded in place. And with your 14mm ratcheting wrench, you can use a socket here as well. Go ahead and tighten that down. Next up, we're gonna reinstall this bracket on the brake line. Now there is a little bit of a lip there that doesn't line up that nicely. If you like, you can trim that down, or you can just have it sit a little bit off of this new spring. Go ahead and thread that in. Then with your 12mm socket, tighten it down. Now that we have our rear install complete, you can slide the spare tire back underneath. Now that you have the spare tire in place, reinstall this bracket here, slide it into the opening in your wheel sideways, and then line up the tab. There's a little tab here. Make sure that pokes through one of the lug nut holes and it's sitting nicely, and then we can retract this cable. Now you can slide the tool for your spare tire through the gap between the tailgate and the bumper. Get it lined up with the bracket. Then go ahead and retract the chain. Retract your tire all the way up until it's fully seated and fully tight on the underneath of your truck. Now we're at the center of your drive shaft. We're gonna install the drive shaft spacers. They just go right in between this bracket and the frame. So what you're gonna do is remove one of these 14mm bolts holding on this bracket with your 14mm socket. I recommend having something underneath to support this drive shaft, but all we're gonna do here is loosen this up a little bit, not remove it completely. By loosening it up, we've made some room on the other side so we can install said spacer. Grab the included hardware with this kit. It should be a washer, a lock washer, and a hex bolt. Get it threaded into the factory location. And now we're gonna leave this one loose while we install the other side. With that 14mm socket, remove the other bolt that you loosened completely. Install the spacer. Then with the included hardware, thread that in. Make sure your spacers are lined up properly. Then with a 17mm socket, tighten them down. And now that the front end is fully reassembled, what we can do here is reinstall the skid plate. Now there are two hooks up front. Make sure you're catching both of those with the two openings in the skid plate. Once you have those locked in, I recommend getting the rear parts installed first. These two factory bolts just to help you hold it in place. Then you can go ahead and install the front ones. Then go ahead and line up and reinstall the front 2 bolts. Then with your 12mm socket, and you may want an extension, go ahead and pull back on the plastic piece and tighten these down. Then go ahead and tighten up the rear ones as well. All right, so now that you have this side fully installed, make sure you repeat all of those steps on the other side. Make sure everything is torqued to spec, and you will need a professional alignment afterwards. But that is going to do it for the review and install of this kit. And remember, for all things Tacoma, keep it right here at extremeterrain.com.